Hey guys, welcome back to Pierre Hache Music. Today, a little different video for you guys. This is an in-depth Q&A with Lindsay Muller. We talked about tricky chords on ukulele and some easier variations, how to approach bar chords, as well as rhythm and strumming on the uke. I hope you enjoy this. It's a longer video. Grab a drink, sit tight, and be sure to like and subscribe. Tons more ukulele content coming soon. Okay, enjoy.
All right, so starting with easy variations with those tricky ukulele chords.
Right.
I find when people are telling me what they're struggling with, always what comes up is bar chords, and then also the chords D major, E major, and E minor. And there's some other ones too, but those are the ones I see most often. And so with bar chords, I learned bar chords on guitar, and which is even harder. And I remember just skipping them and just using three fingers and playing three strings because they were so tricky. But now, when I switched to ukulele, I found bar chords much easier. But I do understand that they are tricky at the beginning because our fingers are it's just so weird for our fingers. They don't have to do that kind of thing and any other time in their lives. So it is a bit tricky at first. But I don't also feel like I know really how to teach them because I just figured it out on my own and that was my own experience. And, it would be great to hear from you how you teach them and how you play them and what you suggest for people who are having issues with them.
Sure, awesome. Yeah. So it's obviously a challenge for most beginners. As soon as you see your first like B minor chord or B flat, it's just like, what the heck? And you want to throw your ukulele against the wall. It's hard to make these things sound good. I also come from a guitar background, and that obviously really helps. So, bar chords specifically, it's a strength thing to have a nice, stiff index that's digging into all the strings just enough, but also the dexterity to press with the tips of the other fingers and place them in, sometimes awkward positions. So, I've come up with a couple exercises with a bit of kind of step-by-step approach, and I've shared that in some tutorials on my YouTube channel. And I think if one were to actually do them for a couple of weeks, it could really help. But it's one of those things that just takes time and persistence. And it's one of those things that is, I believe, harder to learn later in life because that level of dexterity and finesse in the hand is a little harder if you're picking up this instrument in your 50s or 60s. It changes. Even 40s. It's harder to learn these things later. But there is hope. And so what I often tell my students to start with is just barring two strings, right? Like a bar is no more than this. And if you can do this and pluck only those two and make it sound good, that's a great place to start. It's easier to bar towards the middle of the neck. Some people don't realize that. The first fret is stiffer. The strings are just literally tighter there. So it's hard to clamp down there. Start 5th, 6th, 7th, whatever, two strings. Make sure they both ring. And right away, you want to start thinking of your other fingers. If I'm doing this, no good. Okay? And if I'm doing this, hiding behind the neck somehow, some people, no good. So you really want the fingers to be free above the neck. Two strings is great. Three strings, same thing. Get a nice sound on all three. Relaxed fingers above the neck. Okay? Four strings. Take your time, a couple minutes, and it's a bit of a workout thing. It's muscular. This is, it's a technical exercise. You're not really making music when you're doing this, but with the goal of, and then you could, with maybe two strings, work your way towards the nut where it's harder. Three strings, work your way towards the first fret. Four strings, work your way towards the first fret. Do this over a couple weeks regularly, and it'll help. And then, the next step is quite simply to start adding a finger. And you could be as systematic as you want with this. It could be like, okay, I'm going to do 2 and 3 and 4, and the next string 2 and 3 and 4, and just that is hard. Okay, so I'll just demonstrate that real quick. So let's say I want to do bar 3 strings. I'm going to add my middle finger on the first string here, and still only strum 3 strings. And that's a chord. And then I'll add my third finger there, and then my pinky on the first string. and then I would do the same thing on the second string and on the third string. Slowly, when you get to one that's really, really hard, stop. Spend a minute on it, and then maybe move on to playing some songs in C to make it, back to something comfortable. But that's kind of an idea and approach that can help.
That's genius. I love that. I'm so happy that I just learned that from you because I didn't really know how to teach. And
I'm not sure how much it would work. Like, it really depends on how thoroughly you're practicing it, and it depends on your hands. Right? Like so that's where comes some of the easier chord variations can come in handy.
Yeah.
But those steps.
No, but that's excellent. That's excellent.
Thanks.
So why don't we talk a little bit about some easier variations with, like, say, B minor and B flat, or any ones that you have.
Those are the common chords that come up first for beginners, right? Because in ukulele, there's certain keys that fit really well on the uke. So you're often playing in C or an F or an A or G. Like, the songs are kind of always in those same keys. And because of that, you'll often end up seeing a B flat chord. Okay? Because in the key of F, that's the fourth of F is a B flat. And it's going to often come up in songs. It's a hard chord because you're barring the first fret, and then you have to add 2 up here, right? So it's not fun, but once you get it, it works. The easiest variation there is you do a G shape, and you go up to the 5th fret. And if you strum the bottom 3 strings, it's just a G, but at the 5th, my middle finger's at the 5th, and I strum the bottom 3 strings, that's a B flat chord. It's the triad right there. Or if I strum all 4, it's a B flat 6. Okay, so that the top note there, the G, is the 6th in B flat, and so that would work.
Yeah, but even just playing those 3, playing those 3 is already really nice. And if you can already do a G, then you're good to go, right? Which most people start with that. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and so it is a little awkward to strum only 3 strings. If you're in the middle of a song and then all of a sudden you got to get to your B flat and you're just 3, and it's awkward, right? So even these easier variations have their drawbacks. Let's be real. It's not perfect. The 4-string strum is a little easier to do, but it sounds different. Up to you if you want to tolerate it. Then I would work on just doing the bottom 3 strings of the B flat here. Work on that as an exercise, and eventually, and if you do all 4, it's also a B flat 6, and it sounds fine. And then you could eventually add your 3rd finger. Okay, so think of those exercises I was talking about. Eventually, you're going to build up to this, and then you could say, okay, if I add my middle finger on the 3rd string, I'm starting to build a B flat chord. And if I strum the bottom 3, again, trying to be relaxed here, that's B flat, and eventually it's there.
Yeah.
Okay, one more is I teach this one where you can do 1 and 2. Avoid the bar altogether in the 1st fret of the 1st and 2nd string, fingers 1 and 2, and then 3rd finger up here. It's also kind of awkward. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, there's no miracle solution. But if the bottom 3 like this is also, it's gotta kind of cram them in there. It's also a B flat, or all 4 is a B flat 6. So that's another solution. I have some tutorials that show all these different fingerings. You can kind of pick your favorite, but I always encourage you want to build up to these full shapes because they do sound best. And once you get them, I feel they're kind of easiest to place in the end.
Yeah. It's really, you have to go through the mud to get to the other side. You have to play them badly a lot before they start sounding good. Like, there's no jump. You can't skip over the bad sounding part. And you also can't expect them to sound good right away. It's just really probably not going to happen.
Yeah, no, that's well said. I mean, a lot of people run into these walls with the B flat or B minor, and it was all, fun and games when you had C, A minor, and F. You're like, woohoo! And ukulele does have a pretty quick learning curve. You can play easy songs relatively quickly compared to some other instruments,
Yeah.
But there is a next level of challenge there that I think you need to embrace when it comes to those bar chords. And again, so the easier variations can help you get through songs at first if you have a song with a B flat, but with the side project of working on those bar chords is what I would suggest.
Yeah, that's really good. I can imagine, if it was me in a practice routine going through a song, maybe kind of using the easier variation when I'm playing the song, and then kind of outside of that, taking a few minutes to build up your strength in your fingers, just doing those exercises outside of the song so that you can really focus and not get frustrated when you can't play it quickly and
yes.
just do it.
Exactly. And so you have your kind of technique practice, working on the bars, maybe a scale or whatever. But then when you're playing the songs, making it as musical as possible with a bit of a shortcut, I think is totally fine.
Yeah. Nice. What about B minor?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any easier variations for that?
So B minor is interesting. That's the one video I made a tutorial years ago now, I guess 3 or 4 years ago, on B minor, and it's my highest performing video. And that's the one chord that people are searching. How do you play a B minor on ukulele? It comes up fairly often. It's a fairly common chord in popular music, and it's tricky. It's a bar in the 2nd fret, and you would add your 3rd finger up on the 4th string in the 4th fret. So, beautiful chord. Easy variations would be, and again, we want to build up towards this, right? So think of those steps and think of this as one of the steps in that process. But you could make it a little easier by strumming only the bottom 3 strings, doing just the bar like that. I could also think of it as a D chord going down 1 string and strum the bottom 3 like that. It totally works. This one, if you strum all 4, I think it sounds a little too off. We're adding a G note in there, but the bottom 3 strings like that. You could do fingers 1, 2, 3 if you want. Okay, so all of that is good. Or if you take a G minor shape, which is this one here, slightly less common chord, but a G minor, and you slide it, let's see, up to the 5th fret as well. So I'm going to have my index on the 5th fret and then do this shape here. So G minor, and I'm strumming the bottom 3 strings. That is another easier variation for B minor. And if you're doing like a 1 strum kind of run through of a song or a simple strumming pattern, I think that B minor totally works. You could also do this, add your 3rd finger up top here, and that fills up the shape. So now I'm doing 7th fret, 6th fret, 7th fret with the pinky, and then index on the 5th fret. It's a lot at first, but that's another voicing for B minor.
Yeah. I'm not sure which one is trickier. Like, it is like a little bit easier to not do the bar, but I can just imagine people being like, okay, this finger here would take like 5 minutes.
I agree. I think this is comparable difficulty to this for most.
Yeah.
And again, everyone's hands are different. If you got big fingers or stiff fingers or, but I think this, just the bar and the bottom 3 strings, is a really good place to start. Because there you're kind of working on your bars, and as long as you think of just strumming the bottom 3, keeping your other fingers available, that's a good first step.
For sure. And now when you play the bar with your index finger, do you play it like really with your, like this part, or is it more like with the side? Because I've seen people say, oh, move your finger to the side and then it's a lot easier, but I have never done that and it's not easier for me, so I'm wondering what you do.
So I think there's a slight rotation towards me, inward, where it's a little more rigid feeling. The skin kind of tightens up around the bone, and I'm kind of getting close to the fret. But it's mostly, the pad of the finger. I'm not pressing with the side, but there is a slight rotation into the fret, and that helps, I find, get a clean sound. It's not necessary, but I find it a little easier to press very slight. So it's almost like, not the elbow isn't literally coming out, but it's as if the elbow were coming out just a bit, and you're rotating inward towards the fret. But that's a subtle thing. And everyone's bar is going to be a little different. Some people get their index higher up. Like some people play a B flat chord with all 4 strings and this. Mm-hmm. And they think that's way easier. Sure, that's not going to change the sound at all. I just got into the habit of doing this way. You know, so everyone's bar is going to be a little different. The main thing for me is always the sound, right? How does it sound? Are all the strings ringing? And if you take your time and really rely on your ears and the feel of it, you'll get to something that works for you.
Yeah. Awesome. I love those tips. So maybe we can talk about the other tricky ones, the D, the E, and the E minor. And I have
so you mentioned
some
you
things
have
to share with that.
easier variations of those. I'm curious, like how do you teach for example, the D chord to beginners?
Yeah, so whenever I teach a D, I always teach like the normal way because, you know, it can be hard when you're learning how to place your fingers on the strings and squish them all together. Like, it is tricky to do that, but again, I think the more we do it, the more we train our fingers to, know how to smush together. But I find that D sus2, which is just the 2nd fret of the G and the 2nd fret of the C, it doesn't always work, but sometimes it does, so it really depends on the song, but it's just a little bit easier smushing 2 fingers together than 3. So that's kind of my cheat for D. But again, it doesn't always work, so you have to kind of listen and decide for yourself. And then with E, I do a similar thing. So instead of playing the normal E, like that, I'll just do E sus4, which is just moving that shape of 2 fingers up 2 frets to the 4th fret. So now you have 4th fret of G and C. And again, it doesn't always work, but I think like the sound of them just sounds really nice. It has like that open, different sound. I kind of like to do things a little bit differently sometimes because then you're not sounding like everybody else. But again, it has to work. So, but it's definitely a lot easier. The E sus4 is a lot easier than the E.
Yeah,
do you have any? Yeah, and I know some people play it differently too. I don't even know what it is because I didn't learn it that way.
That's a weird one. I find it hard to place quickly, but there's that open voicing.
Yeah. So what do you do for D and E if people are having trouble with them?
It's similar to like the steps of the bar chords. This is like a good step to work on. And it does sound different. You got that sus2 sound. Sus2 meaning suspended second. So the second note of D, which is an E in this case, is ringing. And it sounds great. It sounds awesome. Eventually you might want to try squeezing your pinky back in there, and that's a D major sound. So they're different chords, but if this is what you can do at first, totally cool. D's a weird chord because you have those 3 notes bunched in there, like you said. It's squishy. A lot of people prefer fingers 1, 2, 3. That totally works. I don't. I find I have trouble kind of fitting in there, but you can do it that way. Some people bar the top 3 strings and lift their index. It actually works surprisingly well. So you're barring, but you got to lift at the base to free up the index. You're like bending the knuckle the wrong way a little bit.
Oh man.
And for my hands, it works well. I'm always surprised that it kind of just fits. So I've seen people do fingers, the index barring the top 2 strings, and then your middle finger there.
Wow.
And they say that's way easier for me. Okay, fine. That's, or taking like a G7 shape, going up 1 string and squishing that all together. So it's the same squishiness, but changing the order of the fingers, and they find it easier that way.
Yeah. It's really about trying different things and figuring out what's best for you because everyone's different.
Yeah. So it's totally fine to try those options and find one that works. If you prefer the bar, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, those are the kind of more accessible ones to me. And heck, a D sus2 is awesome. And then so up here, an E sus4, that would totally work. And then the other options for E would be something like doing the top 3, like a D chord, but allowing yourself to be sloppy and mute the first string. So either with my pinky or my index kind of over here, I'm just touching the first string and getting only the top 3 strings to ring. and that's an E. That's an E chord. So I'm just not worrying about this one, the second fret there.
Right.
I'm omitting that
Right.
and muting the first string, or even just not strumming it. And that would be a slightly easier way to play E at first.
Yeah. Great. Awesome. It's good to talk to different people and see what they do.
Yeah. Were there
Just
any
kind of
other
get-
chords?
Oh, E minor.
E minor. Yeah. How do you do that
And
one?
yeah, I suggest to people to do an E minor 7,
Yeah.
which is like that. Second fret of the C, second fret of the A, and the other two are open. Again, doesn't always work. It kind of takes out the minor vibe of the E minor chord. It sounds more like a kind of an open feel sound, but it's much easier just to do that than to do this. But again, I feel like with practice, it's very achievable to do the E minor shape, kind of the staircase shape. And once you've learned that, then you can just, move those fingers over to get B minor, or B7. Yeah, B7. So it's a good shape to practice, but the E minor 7 is, again, one of those chords that will work sometimes, but not all the time. So.
Yeah, no, I find that one doesn't sound too far off. It blends in nicely, and I think that's a great trick. If someone's really struggling with the E minor, that's where I would go to. The minor 7 I think is a great way. The thing with E minor, it's one of those first chords where you're all of a sudden based in the second fret, and just that can really throw off some beginners. It's just weird to have to shift over for a chord at first. And then, getting all those strings to ring. But it is a good chord to get used to. Another very common chord, in popular music.
Yeah. We could talk about different chords forever, but I think strumming would be a great thing to move on to next, because that's another thing that everyone seems to struggle with at the beginning, and I totally get it. Because I remember when I was learning guitar, it looks like the easiest thing in the world to just do this. And then it's just not. And you really have to take your time and, do it simply at first, I feel. And once that becomes easy, then to add on different things. I think people want to do all the strumming patterns right away. And it's just like something that you got to build up your strumming hand muscles, and not even muscles, but just like the way that you do it. Again, it's kind of a different motion than we often do in our normal lives. So yeah, what would you recommend for beginners with strumming?
Right. I mean, so it's a vast topic. I mean, we're talking about playing rhythm on our instrument, and rhythm, no matter what instrument you play, is really, really important. The groove, the feeling, the steadiness, so where to start? And everything you just said, I totally agree with. Plus, adding the element of singing at the same time makes this strumming stuff pretty darn hard to do two things at once. And I find often beginners are very eager to want to sing the songs, because the melody, the vocal line, is like the prominent aspect of the music that we're listening to a lot of the time. And just the strumming pattern on the ukulele sometimes isn't as satisfying to work on. It's not as fun to, they want to sing it. They have trouble holding back from the singing. So I guess that would be my first tip, is, like you said, to work on a simple variation of the strumming, and don't sing. Don't sing for a while. Now, I think one can work on the singing. I think it's, for example, I don't think enough people take the time to really learn the vocal lines, maybe sing along with the recording, maybe read the lyrics on their own, kind of get a more intimate knowledge of the song and the words. But it's like singing along with the recording without your ukulele would be a really great step, because then you're really nailing the rhythms, you're just getting more and more deeper into the song. Then I always suggest to strum through the song with one strum per chord, just a down on each. Let's say you're working on Riptide, A minor, G, and then two C's. Slow and steady. Can you do that? Okay? And then maybe you could try to sing it, okay? I was scared of dentists and the dark. One strum. Now, then, okay, what's the strumming pattern? Down, down, up, down, up. That's the main strumming pattern to Riptide. Later on, if you go based on the recording, they also go into like an island strum. Down, down, up, down, up. Okay, so those are two great rhythms. They're kind of tricky. It's tricky to sing at the same time as this stuff. But can you play the rhythm without singing? Down, down, up, down, down.
Yeah.
Saying the rhythm, down, down, up, again and again and again is a good step. Don't skip that. Play it dozens and dozens of times till it gets easy and comfortable. And then it's hard to sing at the same time. It's just tricky. And I know you've worked on this with students. Sometimes it's like, oh, no, wait, you got to wait till the second strum. Or no, the word lands in the space there before the up. Or what can you do? Sometimes you got to break it down, take the magnifying glass and say, oh, okay, here the word is there. And here the word lands there. And a teacher can really help with this. But then I think just working on the strumming on its own and singing along to the recording and getting those two things really dialed in, locked in, and that could take a week or two. And then when you try to put it all together, it might start to unlock a little bit, and then the teacher can help you. Okay, start singing on this strum, or this is the first note of the song. You're a little flat. This is the note, right? Things like that.
Yes, for sure. Actually, I think when I was learning about how to teach singing and strumming together, I came across your video on it, and that really helped me to break it down into the steps. Knowing the song really well is very important. Being very knowing it by heart, and because if you don't, then it's going to make everything so much harder. So, knowing the song really well, doing them separately first, like you said. It's and also just being patient with yourself and also just keep trying. It's like the bar chords, you have to try and do it many times before you can actually do it well. So, and again, I remember when I was learning guitar and then I was like, okay, I want to sing and play, and this can't be that hard. And it took me 3 months of practicing singing and playing every day to get it. And I had already been playing for a few years at this point. So, I think, I'm not sure, but sometimes I feel like people don't expect playing an instrument to be that hard. Or maybe ukulele, because everyone just says, oh, it's easy, it's an easy instrument, it's fun, it's happy. And then but with any instrument, there's a learning curve and there's work you got to put into it. And there's going to be frustrating moments. But that's it's all part of the fun of learning an instrument. If it was all easy, then there would be no challenges and there would be no fun. So
yeah, no, I'm happy to hear you say it. It's any instrument is as hard as you want to allow it to be. It's as hard as you want it to be. So if you're playing a recorder, I mean, if you Google YouTube the world-class recorder performances, whether it's classical or jazz or people can rip on this stuff, and high-level fingerstyle ukulele things. I mean, it would take a second for me to be completely humbled and in a sense, I'm a beginner. There's a lot of things that I can't do. So the levels can be very, very high. And you said, I think people do expect the ukulele to be kind of easy. And because the learning curve at first is pretty friendly. Those first few steps are oh, okay, C, A minor, great. This is super fun. But you quickly run into those challenges, and whether it's with bar chords or with strumming and singing at the same time and really kind of mastering rhythm to an extent, it can be hard and it does take a lot of work. But if you want to learn to kind of take joy in that work, I mean, that's what practicing is. You got to work on the hard stuff. It's fun to play through songs you know well or more familiar, comfortable things, and I think one should always do that. And you're improving when you're doing that as well. But you got to zoom in and zero in on the challenges that you're facing, and with some guidance, with a good teacher, you can have a more step-by-step kind of smoothed out approach where rather than a few big daunting steps, you might have some small, more manageable steps to work on all this stuff.
Yeah, that's very important. And I'm learning about that as a teacher as well. Sometimes I get so excited about teaching and I want to teach something cool.
Yeah.
And then I forget that it's like, it's too cool. It's not time yet. So that's like my challenge as a teacher is you're like, okay, I just got to break it down a little bit more and let's do these smaller steps.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Yeah.
I get excited too, and you end up giving too much or too many steps ahead. And it's like, you know what? Let's just talk about this in 2 weeks, and it'll be more beneficial then. And that's a tricky thing to juggle too. Is like how much to give, what to hold back. Sometimes the best thing you can do is not talk about that next chord or next rhythm. They just don't need to know right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about another common question that I get, which is how to know which strumming pattern to use for a song. And I was kind of laughing because after we had our last chat, I went on to Facebook, and the first thing that popped up on Ukulele Lovers was this very question. And it was great to go through the responses of the people that commented, because it's pretty much what we were talking about. And that is, you have to feel it. But that can be tricky at first when you're new into music and you don't understand what feeling into the music is. So what do you say to your students who are asking you this question?
So with some songs, it's pretty straightforward. Like if you're that Train song, Hey Soul Sister, the rhythm is down, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, up. And it's a ukulele playing it at first, and you can hear it. You can hear it. And so for an intermediate, an advanced beginner might be able to hear that and jum, chicka, 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 and figure it out. Most recordings don't have a ukulele in them. Most of the songs we're learning aren't from ukulele or even guitar. Maybe more commonly would have guitar in them, but a lot of them don't. So what are we doing? We're imitating a band playing this song. So right off the bat, there's a disconnect. We're doing a remix. We're making our own acoustic ukulele version of this song. Okay. So can you play the song with one strum? Can you play the song with 4 steady strums and sing it? Start there. Then, I hate to say it, but it's just a teacher can really help you just learn what strumming pattern might fit best. So when I listen to a song, it comes pretty quickly, pretty intuitively. Like I play drums as well, and I have a good sense of rhythm. And so, the most common rhythms, the island strum, I don't like calling it the island strum. It's just because it's such a common strum, but the down, down, up, down. 50%.
On your Zoom, do you have the enable original audio? If I touch there's 3 dots and then it says more at the bottom right-hand corner of my screen. When I tap that, there's an option to enable original sound. And I find that helps with hearing the instruments.
Oh, okay, because I've been having trouble with Zoom in lessons, and I started using Jitsi. I don't see those 3 dots right now.
Okay, no worries. It's not super, super important.
Yeah.
But
interesting, though. I didn't realize that was the trick.
Yeah.
If I click on the mic.
Yeah, I think there was an option that I had to look at before, and now it's always an option for me. So I don't know.
Okay.
Anyways,
cool.
Something to look into later.
Yeah. So what was I saying? So
the island strum.
The island strum is really, really common, and you can play a lot of songs with that. Okay, so maybe that could be a good place to start. Or one that comes up a lot is just like down, 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 up, down, 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 up, down. And this is kind of like what I call the rock chorus, rock out kind of vibe. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
With an accent on 3 and a little down up at the end, and that works a lot. But it comes down to listening to the recording, maybe trying a couple rhythms, finding what works. But again, don't get too fancy too fast. Like, you want to start simple. Here, another one might be something like just down, down, up, 3, 4. 3, 4. So with that conscious space there, and that could be a good step if you're trying to sing it at the same time, for example. But in terms of matching the recording, I mean, there's no easy answer here because every song is going to be different. And you might want to look up a YouTube tutorial for it. You might want to look at different tabs. Maybe some guitar tabs have a suggested strumming pattern at the top. Like, don't limit yourself to ukulele chord sites, but look up like ultimateguitartabs.com and see sometimes they have a decent suggested strumming pattern at the top. Sometimes those are wrong and don't really sound great, So start simple, trust your ear, but before you get fancy and go with the feel and what, I'd say, can you play it with a couple simple strumming patterns strictly? And think of that as an exercise, as a good challenge.
Yes. Yeah, those are all really great tips. I've seen someone else say, and of course it depends on the song, but doing a down strum for every syllable that you're singing. So if you're singing the song, so then it kind of, you're singing and strumming at the same time. So like, let's see, an example like you are my sunshine, my only sunshine, because then you're kind of, doing the strum and the voice at the same time. So that could be one. But again, if you have a song with really fast words, then that might be tricky.
Yeah. I think that would be an interesting exercise and would be different with every song. But the challenge is most of the time that the ukulele is like an accompaniment to the voice. And that's exactly what, in the end, we want to avoid is too much of doing the same thing. So, because what happens is if you're trying to go like down, down, up, down, and I was scared of dentists and we don't want to strum at the same time. We want I was scared of dentists and the dark, and get used to those moments where the voice is alone or the ukulele is alone. And that's the hard part, So that's where doing them separately a lot can help, and all the other steps we talked about.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, well, that's really great. That's all really great info. I'm trying to think if I have any other. When I make my songbooks, I kind of take the hard work out of figuring out when to do a down strum. I underline the syllables in the song, where if I was going to play it, that's what I would do.
Sure.
It's pretty much like per chord change, but sometimes there's an extra time when you can do a down strum. So that's what I always recommend for my students is to, when I recommend my books anyways, it's to, follow this first and then, maybe do every beat, a down strum every beat. And then do something else. So whenever I do my tutorials, I try to give 3 different suggestions, from like really easy, which is down strum every underlined syllable or down strum every chord change. And then maybe a little bit harder, once every beat or something like that. And then one that's even a little bit not tricky, but more advanced with an up strum or something, or a finger picking pattern or something. Mm-hmm. So I like to give different levels because everyone's at a different level, and so that's what I do when I'm teaching, but it's always good to hear what other people have to say about that.
No, I think that's great. I think one would benefit from practicing all of those steps and having them kind of locked in, and then that maybe find their kind of way of playing it that they prefer, or that it flows best for them. But that's great. I mean, that's a nice kind of step-by-step approach. I think it would be very beneficial.
Yeah. Anyways, all right. Well, those are the questions that I thought would be really good to talk about. And I think that's great. I think already we've given so much for my students and your students and everyone to think about and practice.